This is All India Radio. In the national program of Talks tonight, we bring you a discussion entitled White Cane, Showing the Way to the World. The participants are Shri Praveen Kumar G, Lead Advisor, Social Inclusion VSO, Shri Prashant Verma, General Secretary, National Association for the Blind, Ms. Monica Sharma, Deputy Manager Trainings, IBM, and Shri George Abraham, CEO, SCORE Foundation, Association for the Blind, who initiates and moderates the discussion.
Hello, Namaskar, Adab. Welcome to this program commemorating and celebrating the International Day of White Cane. I am George Abraham, CEO of SCORE Foundation. We run a program called iWay, which is a knowledge resource on living life with blindness. An inspirational speaker and a communicator. Also had the privilege of producing a television serial in 2013 called Nazar Ya Nazariya, telecast on Doordarshan. I also had the privilege of launching the first World Cup of Cricket for the Blind in 1998 at New Delhi. Partially sighted from childhood, and now I am almost blind. And I also use a white cane for safety and for my mobility. With me in the studio are Prashant Verma.
Hello, I am Prashant Verma, Accessibility and Assistive Technology Consultant, also a social worker, conducting training programs for governments, libraries, universities, NGOs on creating accessible e-books, website and apps. Also helping the National Association for the Blind in providing education, training and various other services to people with blindness and multiple disabilities. Partially blind person, I also use a white cane.
Monica Sharma.
Hi all, I'm Monica Sharma. I work as a Deputy Manager Training with IBM, a white cane user, and I provide mobility through communication and learning.
And Praveen Kumar.
I am Praveen Kumar G, Advisor Social Inclusion working at VSO, Development Organization. We do programs on education, health and livelihood, ensuring that these programs are inclusive of people with disabilities. I do a lot of trainings for corporates, government and UN agencies, NGOs on disability, inclusion and diversity. Mainly I support program designing, program management, monitoring and evaluation. Development professional, totally blind, and I love using my white cane, which I always say is my inseparable companion.
All four of us here today are proud users of the white cane. It is the white cane that gives us the independence, the freedom and the confidence. The white cane was first introduced by James Briggs in 1921. He painted the cane white. Although cane was being used by blind and visually impaired people for thousands of years for moving around. And during the Second World War, there were a number of people who lost their eyesight, and there was a move to popularize the use of white cane. So the white color essentially helps other people to actually see and realize that the person wielding the white cane is blind. So to begin the discussion, I would like to start with you, Praveen. You have been an extensive user of the white cane, and you have been traveling not only across India, the urban areas of India, the rural areas of India, but also globally. So would you kind of share with us how has this white cane been a useful tool?
Thanks, George. Yeah, the white cane is empowering and it actually enables me to be very independent. So I often call it the inseparable companion. It's my inseparable companion, and I always live with it all the time. As George, you rightly said, I've been traveling for the last 20-25 years using the white cane, and the first time I was introduced to it, I was a bit embarrassed, saying that why should I use the white cane? But believe it or not, once I was encouraged to use it by my mother, it became part of myself, and with that now I have the confidence, I'm empowered, and I have the freedom to move about, not only in India but around the world. And there are three key aspects to it. One needs to accept the blindness and begin to use the white cane and see that it is very empowering and enables one to move around. But also it's a tool which enables us to adapt to the environment, and it also enables us to move around to different places with ease and accessibility.
Thank you, Praveen. Monica, now you as a woman who's visually impaired, and you've been blind since childhood, I believe, right?
Yes.
Since birth. How has the white cane kind of served you all these years, number one? And number two, a woman walking around the roads of the city with a white cane? You're advertising that you are a woman, and doesn't it make you too vulnerable?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you for it, George. And well, yes, I have been born blind, and I took the training for orientation and mobility in the National Association for the Blind under the guidance of the teachers there. And I actively started using white cane only when I was out of my school. I ventured into the college life, and that's where active use of white cane began. Now, what happened is essentially when I started using white cane, it was primarily from the bus stand back home. So I remember the initial days when I was coming back home, and one of the fruit vendors, he wanted to help me. What he did was he held the cane from the last edge of the cane, okay? So he held it from the tip, absolutely. Yeah. So he held the cane from the tip, and he started walking with the cane hanging in his hand, and he was trying to guide me to a particular point from where my place was closer. So the journey began with, awareness. So I had to tell him that, the right way, if you want to, first that I don't need help from this point to the house. Gradually, he got to know as I became comfortable, as he saw me being comfortable and walking along from the bus stand way home. And then, of course, there were instances when people would see me with the white cane and they would approach me, "Ma'am, aapko help chahiye." So I have seen people, grabbing my hand. Then what becomes important here, being a woman, is also to tell people the right way of guiding a person who is visually impaired. Yes. So, so for example, one is supposed to, as a visually impaired person, I'm supposed to hold the other person's elbow who walks ahead of me. And that's what tells me what approaches me. However, white cane per se, I used it on my way back and forth home and to office. Now, when I joined IBM, it was a very pampering atmosphere. We were the ones of, my sister and I were the ones of our kind to join IBM along with my husband. So it was like I said, a pampering atmosphere there. And, indoors, I used to, of course, hold people's hands, or rather elbows, to use them as my guides. And gradually what happened is that it came that once I was comfortable with the surroundings and the buildings around, I started moving on my own. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that white cane indoors and outdoors is different. So it has been more of an active use of the white cane for me outdoor than indoors. Indoors also, especially when it's a crowded spot, when there's some kind of an exhibition or some kind of a town hall going on and in a larger space, then probably, using some kind of sighted assistance is always helpful. However, outside, white cane has been like an armor for me, and I still use it actively. And I'm proud that I am using a white cane, like all of us sitting here, because it signifies empowerment and independence. And being a woman, seeking help definitely adds another angle to it. And that's where I feel that, awareness needs to be there for helping people with disabilities, especially with visual disability.
Right. Prashant, you've lost your sight, or you were partially sighted later in life. You were not born with a vision impairment. In the normal course of things, when you lose your sight late in life, you become a little shy and embarrassed to accept the fact that you are visually impaired. So what was your experience in accepting your visual impairment and your willingness to use a cane?
Yeah, namaste listeners. Yes, George. So when I got visually impaired around 20 years of age, so for many years I didn't really accept my condition. And even when I did, I did not start using the white cane for another few years. I always tried to come back to home before it was dark so that I could manage on my own without the white cane. And very often I used to go to places and I used to waste a lot of time finding the exact office or the exact room because my eyesight was not good enough to find that place, and I was not using a white cane, so nobody was identifying me as a visually impaired, nobody coming up to ask me if I needed help. All the time I was being told, and I also saw other people using white cane. I wanted to use it, and finally I overcame this hesitation of mine and then started using it. Now every time I go to a new place or anywhere, I use the white cane, and I have realized that it's actually very, very helpful. First of all, it makes me more safe. I'm able to detect obstacles and objects, and secondly, it helps people identify that I am a person with visual impairment, and accordingly they can also behave. They can ask me for help if needed, or just give me way to go through. It is, I think, absolutely critical for all visually impaired people to use the white cane. Now I am actually an advocate of the white cane. I was not using it for a long time, yes, but I understand the importance.
Wonderful. I think there are a few points that emerge. One is that it gives you immense confidence. It makes you independent. Secondly, I think using a cane also simultaneously results in you yourself accepting the fact that you are visually impaired or blind.
Yes.
And I think that's very critical as life moves forward. And it's interesting that the use of the cane and the acceptance of you being blind kind of concur. That's interesting. And the other thing is, as a woman, you feel perfectly safe and comfortable using a cane in the city. I would like to ask you, Praveen, you traveled in rural India also. And what about blind and visually impaired people in rural India? Do you think, have you seen people using canes extensively, or they have other modes of mobility?
Yeah, the understanding of using of a white cane is limited in rural areas because the awareness and the level of understanding is still very low. However, people do manage without the white cane. So that comes to a very pertinent question, George, because our law, the Persons with Disabilities Act, talks about reasonable accommodation, and it does talk about access to assistive devices. Even the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which India has signed and ratified, Article 20 talks about personal mobility. So if you're a person with visual impairment, it is by fault your right to have access to the white cane in this instance. So people really need to understand that white cane is empowering and it enables them to move around very freely. So as I was sharing earlier, for me, in Delhi itself, moving around, taking the public transport, taking the metro, for example, is very empowering, and I'm able to do it by myself. If I need to go to a shop, I just use my white cane and go around. So it's that very simple. And people in rural areas, it's very important that it is available for them, first of all, and it's also affordable and widely present.
One more question that comes, you talked about moving around freely, going through public transport, talking about going to the shop and so on. How organized and how blind friendly are the cities of this country? Meaning, is it very safe to walk around this city, not by way of somebody attacking you or assaulting you, but the very infrastructure of the country? How blind friendly is it? Say something, Prashant.
To be frank, the environment is not friendly, because see everywhere that there is construction happening, or there are no payments in Delhi, for example, the national capital. So moving around is tough, and with a white cane, only thing we are able to do is orient ourselves and be mobile, but the external environment is definitely not welcoming. When I meant going to the shops, yes, it is empowering for me to go to the shop, but to navigate all the drains and the steps and etc., it's a big task.
Yeah, that brings me to another question. You used the word orientation. Monica, you did talk about being trained to use a cane when you were at National Association for the Blind. Is it okay if somebody just gives you a cane and says, okay, chal bano, get going? Is that the way to go, or there is a certain amount of training required? And what is this training actually all about? Is it just about wielding the cane, or there's more to it?
I would say it is a comprehensive training, and it is extremely essential for any person who's visually impaired to go through it. What is taught during that training is, of course, you just can't head out with a cane.
Right.
You need to know basic techniques. For example, when you're using the cane, when your left foot steps forward, the cane has to be parallel to the right foot.
Yeah.
And when the right foot steps forward, the cane has to be again parallel to the left foot. What this does is it ensures that you get the feedback about the next footstep. Okay, is it safe to take that footstep, or do we need to move around? So here is where trailing comes in very handy. This is where you need to trail the cane along the pathway to ensure that there's no there's no obstruction.
There's no pit or obstruction. Or
Correct.
whatever. Yeah.
Yes. Also, while we climb up and down the stairs is when use of white cane is very important, because that helps you detect the change in the platform, and whether it is a ramp, or for that matter, if there's a manhole on the road. So is it something which sort of elevated, or is something which is deep down? So those are again some of the things that using a white cane you can freely get to know. And adding to that is also the fact that now we have tactile paths in the metro stations, and these are very, very helpful in identifying the place and to navigate around the metro station. And it becomes important, and in fact it becomes easy if a person is trained on orientation and mobility, and which is next necessary for anyone who's visually impaired.
Another interesting thought is that when you are traveling and you're going to a place where you've not been before, so you have no clue as to we turn left or right, or you have to go straight. You're not sure is it the third building or the fourth building. Now, how do you deal with such a situation, Praveen?
That's a big challenge. But here, we also use assistive, devices. Like, for example, our phone is accessible if anybody is using Android, we have the TalkBack. If then you have the iOS, VoiceOver, and so on. So with that, we are able to, pin the location where we need to go. And that supports us because, I use Uber, for example. So if I have to go from point A to point B, I just pin the address of point B and the Uber drops me there. So we do use assistive device along with the cane, which enables, makes life more easy.
The other day, this brings me to a little story. The other day I was traveling from somewhere in the Aerocity area towards Noida in Delhi, and normally I talk to the driver and keep a track of where I'm going. This driver was a silent fellow. He didn't talk. So whenever I asked him a question, he wouldn't reply. So I had to switch on my phone, and I switched on an app called Lazzarello, which immediately started telling me where I was. It started calling out the landmarks, at Hyatt Regency Hotel or Safdarjung Hospital or AIMS or South Extension, and specific locations. So I straight away knew that he was taking me on the right track. Monica, for example, you work in a corporate setup.
Yes.
And, one of the things which people believe is that it's one thing to be given a job. It's another thing to be able to do your job independently.
Correct.
So how do you actually handle that independence? Like, the cane helps you to get to the work. It helps you to probably move around the office. How do you deal with your job independently?
Then we're talking about other aspects like using devices like laptops and, of course, mobile phones. But talking more from the mobility perspective, what the organizations like IBM do is that they have braille labels on the rooms. So those braille labels help one identify which place one is in or at. So the same case, the lifts also have, the elevators also have those, I don't know what you call that, but I'm sorry, they keep announcing at every floor, first floor, second floor.
It keeps telling you first floor, door opening,
door closing,
lift going up, and so on.
Correct. And it also announces the floor. So that is how, one is able to navigate at workplace. Also, figuring out, in fact, keeping a count of the walls that you need to cross. For example, if I need to go to a particular room back from the restrooms. So I know I have to take 2 right turns. So I need to, walk against the wall to be able to figure out that I don't miss the turn, especially when there are too many of those in case. So that is how I keep a track of the turns and figure out my way back to the room. So the infrastructure is really accessible at work.
And what about doing your work, actually doing your work? Meaning that's another challenge, isn't it?
That's another challenge if we don't have the screen readers in place and if we don't have the bug fixes which prevent one from accessing the needed applications. So once you have accessibility in place, and which is more so the case, is when life becomes easy, and that's how it is for me at IBM.
Prashant, you and your wife Veena, you've been living alone independently ever since you guys got married, and you guys take pride on being independent.
Yeah.
So can you share some of the technologies and devices you use to actually be able to deal with your life independently?
Yes, for mobility as well as for independent living and for meeting day-to-day challenges, we are trying to make use of all available technologies. Quickly, like say from mobility, I look at it, there are 3 aspects. There is obstacle detection, there is wayfinding and orientation. So for obstacle detection, white cane is a must, so that we do whenever we are moving out. For finding the way to go from one place to another, we are making use of the GPS applications, some of which you also mentioned. Orientation, again, we make use of different technology. At home, so we have tried to identify applications and appliances which are more accessible. Say for example, a talking microwave oven, or maybe a washing machine with tactile buttons, a talking television, or we have just figured out some like simple solutions to help us identify our home door or building using some remote call bell, or maybe making use of audio labelers to label the various items in the house, including various cloth items. So these technologies are thankfully easily available in India as well, and they are very much affordable. People just need to explore and adapt them. So that is helping us like very independently and with satisfaction.
Monica, how do you actually manage your travel? Do you use the bus? Do you use the metro? Or do you use cabs? Meaning, how does it work?
So mostly I travel by office cabs,
Yeah.
which is a facility that's given to me.
And what happens if the office cab does not turn up?
Yes, or if I choose not to take the office cab, which is quite often the case.
Yeah.
In that case, I travel by metro. And however, my first option is Uber. And I have mapped my office location through GPS, and that is how I choose the location. And of course, I have to keep asking the driver, like you mentioned on the way, as to where we are. So that helps me also to understand if I'm on the right track. As a woman, it's important for me to ensure my safety, which is, thankfully kept well placed because of these technical devices and these apps. So mostly I take the metro, and my second preference is the office cab, and the third one is Uber. So that's how I commute.
Yeah, actually, these app-based cab services have become quite a boon for people who are visually impaired. It would be a great idea if the auto rickshaws and the buses also become, app-based, or there's some technology.
Autos are.
Some autos are, yeah. So that's a very welcome kind of advancement, because that makes city living kind of that much easier for people who are visually impaired. So what do you guys do for entertainment? You people go for movies, go out to restaurants and so on? Prashant?
Yes, we want to, and we do that. There are some challenges, but thankfully some solutions are coming up. Nowadays we get some audio described programs, movies and other TV series in some apps, the internet based apps. They are very good. They are very accessible to us. Some of the mainstream movies are also getting audio described, just a few at this time. That really helps us, then we are really able to enjoy them independently. Going to restaurants, of course, we do that. Reading the restaurant menu is sometimes a challenge. So as you people already discussed, so we have lots of solutions and technologies at this time. At some places we have some accessibility challenges, people not designing the physical infrastructure or the technical infrastructure in compliance to guidelines. At those places we have like some bottlenecks, some hurdles.
Monica,
yes.
Bharat and you and your son probably go out on Saturday evenings.
Yes.
To the shopping malls. So do you take somebody who's sighted with you, or you guys go independently? Meaning, how do you do it?
So if we have to go to restaurants, and if it's if it's just the three of us, then of course we three tag along, of course. However, if it's going to a mall, then I trust some people with their choices. I don't want to take a risk on that. So that's when I go with my brother and my family. So those are some opportunities where you do need to rely on somebody, and you should know who to rely on. As a person, you need to look smart, and that's why, especially going to a mall, and if for the purpose of shopping, then yes, I would like to take along somebody who I can trust. However, for eat outs and for movies, of course, the three of us have our fun time. And for us, and especially while I'm watching a serial, and if it's something that my son also likes to watch, then most of it, the background music is self-explanatory as to what is going on. And there are some you don't want your child to describe, then you know where to keep quiet. And then there's a habit that my son has developed that, wherever something is going on without any dialogue, then he makes it a point to explain information which is worth knowing for me.
So audio description happens.
Audio description happens, absolutely.
So another very important thing is reading. And I know that in the mainstream also people have stopped kind of reading. People are more with the phones. And so, Praveen, do you do a lot of reading, or it's you're also going with the current flow?
I do a lot of reading actually, because we have these days Wikipedia, and it's very helpful. So you think of anything and you can just go and read on that. And just to let you know, I use a text-to-speech screen reader as well, and very useful. So not only that, but there are a lot of books which are there online, and those books are very helpful to kind of update yourself and read. The other part is I'm a very ardent a listener of radio and TV news actually, because mainly All India Radio, and I particularly want to mention here, I love the news 7:30 to 8 in the morning, which gives like a capsule of all the news from the metros and whereabouts. So I've been listening to it for nearly, I think, more than 10 years, and every day. It's a religious kind of an activity. Besides that, watching TV and movies, yes, definitely. We do, me, my wife, my son, we all love, watching movies and going around, shopping, and we do enjoy life as anybody else.
Great. I believe that like the cane empowers you to move around, to progress in life, I think education is very, very critical. And education is a challenge when it comes to visually impaired people. Though there are blind schools across the country, everybody knows there are blind schools. But still, in terms of content available for the classes, the various subjects, the new syllabus that's coming in, Prashant, can you throw some light on how people who are blind can cope with, the reading challenges of education?
So earlier, Braille used to be the only medium for the visually impaired to read and write. Thankfully now the digital text has become accessible due to the screen reading software mainly. It is possible for the visually impaired people to independently use the computer or the smartphone or various ebook readers. Because of that, the supply of the books that are available to the visually impaired has increased quite a lot. Thankfully, many of the mainstream ebook services are accessible, and they have millions of books, particularly for higher education, competitive exam preparation, university education. At school level, some organizations and some governments are trying to convert the print books into e-book format. They are trying to make it accessible. There is still more work needs to be done in that aspect, but yes, the situation is much better. If visually impaired students learn to use the digital medium, then they have like a lot of opportunities. They have access to so much more reading material and also all the information that is available on the internet.
Great. And in fact, I have been reading quite a bit of late. And in fact, the first 40 years of my life, I hardly read any books because I had to depend on my parents, my siblings, and my later stages, my wife, to read out books. And everybody was busy. So the odd book would be read. But in the last 10 to 12 years, I have read more than 600 books. And so it's fascinating. Book is a fantastic entertainment source, fantastic source for knowledge, fantastic resource for learning the language, learning to communicate, learning to express yourself. And I think every blind person, to my mind, should access the various resources that are available to read. And knowledge is what drives the world today. So the white cane takes you from one place to the other, but knowledge is what takes you from one level to the other. In closing, what I would like each of us to briefly do is maybe in one line share as to what the white cane actually means to you. And let's start with the lady, Monica.
White cane to me is ease and empowerment.
Prashant?
Yeah, it is a symbol of independence for the visually impaired.
And how about you, Praveen?
White cane to me is confidence and passion.
Yeah, interesting.
So maybe I should also add to this. The white cane to me is, I think, about safety and confidence. For thousands of years, mobility was all about using a cane. But today, in this competitive world, mobility is not just about moving from point A to B. It is about traveling through life. And for this, the white cane is critical, and so is various assistive technologies and the wonderful script of Braille. I believe the sky is the limit when it comes to living life. The only thing is, blind and visually impaired people might have a different way of doing things. And I think the society at large needs to recognize that there is talent and potential. And I think people with vision impairment and blindness should be allowed to evolve using their strengths rather than having to conform to the way the world does things.
In the national program of Talks Tonight, you were listening to a discussion entitled White Cane, Showing the Way to the World. The participants were Shri Praveen Kumar G, Lead Advisor, Social Inclusion VSO, Shri Prashant Verma, General Secretary, National Association for the Blind, Ms. Monica Sharma, Deputy Manager Trainings, IBM, and Shri George Abraham, CEO SCO Foundation, Association for the Blind, who initiated and moderated the discussion. Produced by Nitish Kumar Arora, this program was a contribution of AIR Delhi in our national program of Talks and came to you from the Delhi station of All India Radio.